Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Solar. Okay, so this episode, The Fog of Pupa, is the season 3 finale. It is the final episode of season 3. It's the one where once again the Pupa changes into a different color. But in this episode, the Pupa is stuck between two different colors for reasons that'll become apparent once I start reviewing the episode. But the episode opens up with the solar opposites. It actually opens up with a family praying for dinner, and suddenly the solar opposites just barge through the wall. And what we find out is that they've actually brought their Hungry Hippos game to life using a ray, and they're now playing Hungry Hippos for real, where the hippos are eating real things and they're counting it as points. And of course, they're just rampaging through the streets doing that. But it's at this point where Terry actually winds up getting a call. And Corvo asks him what it is, but Terry, of course, doesn't really explain right away because as we find out later, he's currently quote unquote winning game night, and he doesn't want people to know right away because he's currently in the process of winning, and he doesn't want to give that up. But eventually he does finish the phone call and relents, and he does tell Corvo that the Pupa was arrested at the mall, and Corvo immediately stops everything so that they can go and pick up the Pupa. But of course, as I said, Terry doesn't want to. He's very much winning game night, and he doesn't want to give that up. But he does eventually relent, but he becomes frustrated about the fact that he was currently winning game night, and it's only ever when he's winning game night that they actually go to pick up the Pupa and stop doing things, which he notes is some bullshit. But in any case, they then proceed to go to the mall security room where. We do find out a bit about what happened, about how the Pupa had been entering the jewelry store, and also Miss Frankie and Principal Cook are there just because. We actually do find out that they actually have jobs at the mall because obviously I've talked about this in a previous episode, but the teacher salaries do not pay enough, and they sometimes have to get second jobs. That is very much the thing. In fact, it was in my review of the very first episode of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. That was the motive behind that. That was the motive behind the first villain. He was their science teacher. He didn't think he was getting paid enough, so he started robbing banks to make ends meet. So that was the entire motive behind that. But in any case, putting a pin in that, he then proceeds to go on to the security guard then proceeds to go on to explain how the Pupa had actually walked into a jewelry store and stole earrings, which of course Terry and Corvo are very confused about, pointing out that obviously the Pupa doesn't have ears, he can't wear earrings, but then Principal Cook proceeds to explain how the Pupa's actually been running a black market piercing ring at school, and because of that, people have actually been getting infections. And sure enough, he proceeds to pull up his shirt to reveal that he had his nipples pierced, and they're swollen and infected, which grosses pretty much everybody out for obvious reasons. And it's at this point where the principal, where of course the security guard then proceeds to point out that he doesn't fully understand what's going on, but he's also notices that the Pupa's showing telltale signs of lashing out like a teenager. And while Corvo denies this, pointing out that the Pupa's always been a temperamental little supercomputer, he has never really caused any sort of problems. But as Corvo is saying this, the Pupa is actually quite literally tantruming up a storm. And then proceeds to bust open the interview room with the one-way glass. He proceeds to do that, and of course Corvo quickly realizes the Pupa's out of control, and he understands completely what's going on, and tells the security guard that he'll take him right home, and then the solar opposites leave with the Pupa and bring him back home, and start quickly going through his playhouse and going through all of his stuff. And sure enough, they find a whole bunch of negatively influencing things. They find the film Joker. Of course, they also find his mech suit that he used in that one episode, which Terry denies he's never seen before, because obviously he knows about the Pupa and his whole scheme thing that he did. But completely denies it in front of Corvo. Of course, after going through the Pupa stuff, he points out that that's obviously seems like a negative influence with what's going on with the Pupa. He points out that obviously he feels like the Pupa needs to be punished, and they tell the people that he's going to be grounded for 1 Earth month, which he assumes is a necessary Earth punishment, because obviously he's not human. Corvo, the solar opposites, they're not human. They don't know human culture or anything like that. So they just assume that's an appropriate that's an appropriate punishment for someone who's growing up. And of course the Pupa is also of course lashing out as well. So I'm pointing out that he didn't really want to be assigned to them, but of course, when the Pupa winds up getting grounded, he winds up laying out a primal scream that shuts down the whole house's electricity. And of course they're trying to figure out why the power shut off. But Corvo tells them that the power will be back on in a couple of minutes, and that in the time being the Pupa is just throwing a tantrum, and that it'll eventually sort itself out. At which point the power comes back on, and we discover that the Pupa is actually stuck between 2 colors now. We find out that it's actually stuck between blue and green. And of course Terry points out that he's no Pupa expert, but that he's pretty sure the Pupa isn't supposed to do that. But then Yummy points out that obviously Terry is the Pupa expert. He should know. And of course, since Terry quickly realizes he's not the Pupa expert, he is the Pupa expert, but he's really terrible at his job. They proceed to bring the Pupa to Aisha for analysis, and Aisha, after sassing them about the fact that they always come to them with her problems, she then proceeds to explain exactly what's wrong with the Pupa. That's when the Pupa is stuck between 2 colors, it means that somebody tainted its evolution, and of course this is what Corvo ultimately tries to figure out. He tries to scold the rest of the solar opposites, asking them which one of them tainted his evolution, and they point out that they were all perfect influences on the Pupa, and point out that they couldn't have possibly tainted its evolution. So which of course is a lie, and we'll get to that in a minute. But or rather, it's a half truth, because they don't fully understand what they did wrong. But they also proceed to point out that it's most likely the negative influences of the outside world in general that are causing the Pupa to become tainted. And Corvo agrees that is most likely it. So he decides that in order to kind of purge the negative influences of the world out of and human culture in general out of the Pupa, he tasks the Pupa with painting the ship, and it tells him that he has to paint the entire ship top to bottom. At which point they find out Terry finds out via his phone that the hungry hippos are actually wandered into the mall. If they can hurry, they can still pick them up and finish the game. And of course they all proceed to get into the car and go do that. And they do wind up picking up the hungry hippos, which wind up eating somebody on the way home, which of course Yummy counts as being a point. But when they get home, they discover that the ship is missing, and they notice that although Terry points out that it actually kind of looks better without the ship on top, but Corvo is obviously frustrated by that, and he immediately barges in to actually scold the Pupa about what happened, and notices that the Pupa had actually sold the ship for a PSA, to which and of course, obviously the PlayStation 8 isn't gonna be out yet. Probably isn't going to be out for the foreseeable future. We're currently on the PS5, PS8, nowhere near that yet. But And of course, when they scold the Pupa for actually selling everything, he points out that he never wanted to be assigned to them. And of course, Jessie is the first one to note that the Pupa is now talking full sentences, which she strikes as a little bit odd. But of course, Terry and Corvo point out that they're obviously going to have to go get their ship back from the witch, and apparently, and what we find out is that apparently, and this happens completely off screen because it's not in any of the episodes I reviewed, but But Terry comments that they had actually been talking about fighting the witch for about 3 seasons now, which never actually happened. And points out that obviously he's a little bit scared that it's finally happening. And of course Corvo points out that they're just hoping that Fox doesn't cut that Disney doesn't cut the budget for their upcoming fight, and doesn't cut the actual fight itself, pointing out that it's going to be a very epic and very over the top, and that they're obviously going to need to pull out all the stops for that. And of course, the fight itself, and of course that's a reference to the fact that that the show is actually licensed by Fox, which is itself owned by Disney now. So yeah, that's an obvious joke for that. But they wind up cutting the fight. But not for the reasons you think, as it turns out the witch is completely 100% pleasant, and they actually do tell Jesse and Yumulak to watch the pupa and make sure he doesn't get in any more mischief beforehand. But when they come back, we find out that the witch was actually a completely pleasant person. They had completely misjudged her, and she happily gave them the ship back on the grounds that they also buy somewhere for unsold merchandise, which they happily do. And also they come back with a tow bed and a pumpkin truck, like literally a truck shaped like a pumpkin. That's the thing. But when they come back, they discover that there's actually a raging party at their house, and they start looking around trying to figure what's going on, and they quickly conclude that the pupa is actually the one who threw the party. And of course, we find out in the interim, he does this previously, but we find out in the interim that he had actually laid an egg and hatched a little buddy. Which of course is kind of seemingly just palling around with Pupa, and they try to find Jesse and Yumulak, and they quickly find Yumulak, who does a cannonball into a kiddie pool, which is dangerous. Don't do that. And of course they immediately realize that Jesse and Yumulak actually enabled the Pupa to throw the party. And of course, they quickly find out that Jesse and Yumulak enabled the Pupa to throw the party, and chew them and scold them for it. Which, of course, they immediately point out that they did watch the Pupa, but they watched them throw a party instead. At which point, Corvo kicks everybody out of the house and immediately pulls everybody inside. But in case left with no other option about the Pupa and to actually get him to discipline himself, they decide to actually take the Pupa to the one place where they believe that they can actually get him to actually get bent into shape. And then they decide to bring him to Mark Wahlberg, but as it turns out, Mark Wahlberg has a restraining order against him, so they bring him to military school instead. And of course, what they quickly find out is that obviously the drill sergeant yells a lot, and he calls everybody maggot, which they point out has diminishing returns. But he then proceeds to look down at the actual Pupa, and he's very interested in the fact that he's all this time he's been calling people maggots, but he's never actually trained an honest to god maggot. Which and then asks the Pupa what his name is, but the Pupa he just corrects him and tells him that he's a maggot, and of course they then proceed with satisfied that the solar opposites now have a plan to actually turn the Pupa whip the Pupa into shape. Then proceed to leave and get ready and go back home. But on the way home, they discover that the Pupa has apparently escaped out of military school, and has actually convinced the drill sergeant to actually start being a bad influence along with him, which winds up being the final straw for the solar opposites. They proceed to pull the Pupa inside, and they decide to actually that since Little Buddy is actually the one, they decide that Little Buddy is the one causing the problems, and that Little Buddy's being an influence, even though the Pupa insists that the Little Buddy is his friend and that he's not doing anything wrong. But of course Corvo just does not listen, and proceeds to pick up the Little Buddy, and then proceeds to decide to pull out a ray that will turn him into a paperweight, which he tells the Pupa that obviously he's going to have to be punished for that, and which means no more Little Buddy. So he turns the Little Buddy into a paperweight. So this of course causes the Pupa to finally become physically utterly frustrated, and then he proceeds to throw a tantrum, which of course Terry points out that they probably should have babied him a little bit more, but Corvo points out that it's just a tantrum and that he'll eventually tire himself out. But then the Pupa explodes violently into a mist, and this mist winds up blanketing the entire town, and And of course, they quickly realize that they need to actually find a way to get the pupa to turn condense back into its physical form. So they get into the pumpkin truck again. They start driving around town, hollering at the pupa to condense back into its physical form, while looking around, and it's just obvious that the entire town is just a mess because of this. But of course, they also start having an argument about whether it's actually a mist. They argue whether it's a mist, a fog, or a steam. It's obviously a fog, but Corvo winds up settling on steam and starts calling it a steam. But of course, but it's at this point where they see somebody run out of the, the building, and they see someone run out of the mist and tells them that there's monsters. Which of course causes them to actually quite literally get upset with them, because obviously they've run out of nowhere, and they think the guy's making it up. But then they quickly discover that he's talking legit, because suddenly several monsters just come out of the steam and start attacking people. And then one of them attacks the pumpkin truck and starts flattening it and breaking it into pieces. And they immediately get out of the pumpkin truck and immediately run as far as they can, eventually running into a grocery store where they discover several other refugees hiding out inside. And they immediately run inside, where they meet Principal Cook and Miss Frankie again, who actually reveal that they aren't working there this time, and that they're actually just there to pick up dinner when all of this craziness happened. Of course, they obviously point out that, and of course they're quick to blame the rest of the solar opposites for this whole mess, pointing out that they were the ones that did this. But of course they point out that obviously they don't think that they think they're still innocent, but they don't think they've done anything wrong. And I'll explain that. But it's of course at this point where of course one of the monsters barges in, and they quickly discover that the monsters are just manifestations of teen angst. They barge out of one of them comes in and pretends to be and is very much acting like a teenager. It's a little pterodactyl type monster, but they quickly realize that yes, it is in fact the manifestation of the pupa's teen angst, and they quickly realize that they need to figure out a way to actually get the pupa to actually calm down and stop being an angsty teenager. And of course, they realize that the best way to do that is with Little Buddy. They decide that the best way to fix the pupa is to let Little Buddy out of his glass, and of course Miss Frankie and Principal Cook volunteer to take them with, along with a guy named, I think his name is Steven, but along with a guy. He's not really important either way. He dies eventually, but he's introduced, and they bring him, and and Miss Frankie brings them all into their car, but quickly reveals that she actually has a breathalyzer in her car, which she remarks isn't working because she's too drunk, and that 0.9 is her baseline. So she asks if anybody else is okay enough to drive, and Terry tries it, but he winds up being 2.0, which is too high. And eventually Jessie's the one who passed the breathalyzer test, and she's the one who's allowed to drive, even though she's too short to drive. I should point that out. Replicants are too. She's a replicant. She's the equivalent of a child. She's too short to drive. But in case it does wind up working, and they do wind up weaving their way through the monsters, and eventually do wind up back in the house. But eventually Stephen winds up getting attacked and killed. And of course they wind up getting surrounded by monsters. But of course, Corvo comes up with a brilliant idea that since they're the manifestations of teen angst, they can drive the teenagers away with what things that would typically piss off a teenager. And sure enough, they do exactly that. They ask them if they can meet. And it's a very fun little commentary about that, because they start saying things that teenagers would obviously be upset about, and it winds up working, which is funny. But in case they arrive back at the house, but Yummy quickly discovers a problem, that the ray that turns Little Buddy into a paperweight doesn't have a reverse function, and of course Corvo points out they never foresaw an option where they would actually have to undo a paperweight type situation. So, but he does point out that it'll take 12 hours, but he will be able to figure out a solution, and does tell, and of course he proceeds to go into this long, lengthy process about how they're going to undo the transformation. But Terry eventually just picks up the paperweight and breaks it open, and this causes Little Buddy to go free. But instead of helping Little Buddy calm Pupa down, Little Buddy just runs off into the mist, and we don't see him for pretty much the rest of the episode. He shows up like once at the end, but for the most part he just runs off and disappears. And And of course, it's at this point where they've realized that they've now tried everything, and now they have literally nothing left to try. So the solar opposites conclude that they're just going to have to kill the creator of the Joker movie, and then just get that over with and see if that calms the people down. But it's at this point where Principal Cook and Miss Frankie actually stop them and finally tell them that what they're actually doing wrong. As they point out, it's obviously a home problem. They point out that since they're teachers, they obviously know how to deal with this kind of situation, and they point out that the Pupa has no structure in his life. He literally grows up watching his parental figures just run amok, do whatever they want, do a whole bunch of sci-fi nonsense, and the Pupa kind of picked up on that and started doing that. So, and of course they point out that they obviously as parents, it's their job to make sure that the Pupa is raised right and not negatively influenced in any way. But of course they point out that they're not actually his parents. That Terry and Corvo point out that they're not actually his parents. Pointing out that actually the Pupa's just part of their team. But then Miss Frankie asks them if they bathe him, feed him, and worry about if he's going to be kidnapped by a pedophile or run over by a car. And of course they wind up saying yes to most of those things. Terry points out that he actually has them flipped in his brain where he gets run over by a pedophile and get kidnapped by a car. But the idea is the same, so he ultimately says yes. At which point Miss Frankie points out that they are in fact parents, and that it is in fact their fault that the Pupa is acting like this way. So they point out that they need to find structure in their life and not actually, just run around doing sci-fi nonsense. But of course, none of the solar opposites believe her at first, believing that it's not that they're actually awesome, and then proceed to point out that they're going to just default to their original plan. But then they see one of the monsters walk by, who then proceeds to spout out a bunch of lines about that are very, very reminiscent of what Terry and Corvo and the other solar opposites say all the time. And then they quickly realize that Miss Frankie is actually right, and that they're going to need to figure out a way to find a way to actually give the Pupa more structure in his life. And of course, Corvo then proceeds to actually take the first step, which is to, first and foremost, he tracks the hungry hippos that they enlarged and brought to life show up. So Corvo proceeds to return them back to game pieces, and then decide to play hungry hippos like a normal family, which of course frustrates Yummy specifically, but of all of the rest of the solar opposites. But they point out that this is actually what's going to work, and sure enough, the Pupa then proceeds to then rematerialize back into its physical form while some of the monsters start disappearing. At which point they realize that's working. They realize that they quickly need to find ways to actually give the Pupa more structure. And of course, Sarah and Corvo wind up settling on the fact that they can actually wind up getting full-time jobs instead of just screwing around working on the ship or whatever the hell. Which of course winds up causing the Pupa to materialize even more. And Jesse and Yummy for their part, decide to actually start going back to school and start actually caring about going to school. Which of course they conclude that this is absolutely a new step for them, and that they can absolutely do this for the Pupa. And of course they cheer for the Pupa, at which point the Pupa rematerializes and is now fully green instead of a cross between green and blue. And this is the Pupa's new color going forward, presumably. This is going to be what the Pupa is going to be for the next season. It's now going to be blue. Meanwhile, the solar opposites then proceed to do exactly what they were setting out to do. Terry and Corvo wind up getting a 9-to-5 cubicle office job, which they hate, and for a number of reasons, namely that the job is just stressful, and that the boss is just very demanding. And when we find out there's a bit of nepotism going on, so they kind of have to listen to somebody they don't really want to listen to. But they quickly find out that it's actually is a lot harder than they thought. And also adding to that, the replicants then proceed to start going to school, but wind up getting bullied a little bit while on the bus, and they wind up working on actual homework and all those other things. But and of course when they also drop the people off at daycare at one point as well. But when they get back home, they wind up being completely stressed and wiped out from their day. I'm pointing out that they actually Yummy has to finish a 95-page essay on a topic that's kind of pointless and useless, and asks him if he can use the homework ray at least once. But of course, what we also find out during the sequence is that the ship is actually has not been used in a while. So all the rays are in boxes. All of the ship is completely filthy, and they don't go in there much anymore. Which and of course, Corvo also points out that there's no more rays in the house, but of course, and he's also goes back to making it salmon, which is what he's making. And it's at this point where Terry gets a call, and he quickly becomes frustrated by the contents of the call. But what we find out is that their boss has apparently just decided to invite himself over, and has not really taken into consideration that they're making something else, because he decides that they're going to be making chicken when of course Corvo's already started making salmon, and he becomes frustrated with that, and is forced to throw, and then he's now forced to throw out the meal he's been working on and start over. And he also has only a half an hour to do it, because the boss just decided, hey, I'm not going to give them any advance notice. I'm just going to be coming over in a half an hour, and they're going to have to work that out. But of course, it's at this point where the solar opposites then proceed to vent about all the various things that's bothering them, pointing out all the obviously cool adventures that they went on throughout the first 3 seasons, and points out that they obviously they feel like this is their life now, and that they feel like something is now missing from their life. But of course, it's at this point where the Pupa stops listening to its iPad and tells them that it loves them, and they decide that it's worth it. So they proceed. So Terry and Corvo continue to go to their 9-to-5 job, which of course they hate, and that's where the episode ends, with them trying to photocopy papers. So yeah, this episode kind of changes the structure of what the Solar Opposites show is going to be for quite a bit. Obviously, they're not going to be doing as many sci-fi adventures, because now they're trying to actually take 9-to-5 jobs, and are obviously going to continue doing that, presumably in the foreseeable future, because that's what the Pupa needs to actually continue its evolution. So, yeah, of course, the Pupa. So, of course, that's going to be what the series is going to be going forward, which is interesting and exciting, but also kind of a mess. But yeah, I'm interested to see if that's actually going to stick, because obviously the Solar Opposites the entire thing of Solar Opposites is that they're obviously a migrant family trying to figure out how to live in a new environment, but they just happen to be aliens from a sci-fi planet. But I'm curious how this whole thing is going to actually work out. I'm curious if the show is actually going to stick with this premise of them all focusing on on actual human things rather than sci-fi, or if they're eventually going to default back to sci-fi. I would probably put my money on the latter, because this is a sci-fi series. But we'll see. We'll see how that winds up shaping out, because obviously, and also I think there are two more specials that are supposed to come out for this season as well. So we'll see in the very near future what's going to happen with this. I don't know. I don't fully know, but we'll see. But in any case, that's going to do it for my review of Solar Opposites and the season in general. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But also be sure to check out my Twitch, because I stream Saturdays and Sundays now on 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. Please go check this out. I'm trying to push for affiliate over there, and I would very much appreciate it if you did. And but in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and also next time I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.